everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to tell you all about the first year with my sourdough starter and how I use it throughout my everyday homemaking life. So I have a handful of notes written down that I want to make sure I reference throughout this video, but if this is your first time watching a video like this or watching one of my videos, this is just my opinion, just how I have found that sourdough has worked for me. It could be totally different depending on you, the starter you have, and especially the region in which you live. I live in New York, and it can be totally different depending on where you are elevation wise. I know that makes a difference in some cases. So again, this is just my opinion and how I have found that the starter works for me and how sourdough works for me living on the East Coast. So the first little nugget I want to point out is that in the beginning I was very precise with my starter. If you are new to my channel, I've mentioned a couple of times that I used to be in school for baking and pastry arts. I have a degree in it. I have taken many bread classes. I have made bread many times, and in one of my classes it was a requirement for us to keep a starter alive for the entire duration of the class, which was about 6 or 7 weeks, and I failed. I failed miserably. It died. It died very quickly, and it did not last. But I do want to say that, you know, it comes with time and patience and practice, but first and foremost, you do not have to be super precise. This is something I have found that works for me with my starter and my journey with my sourdough. I have found you don't really have to be precise. When I feed my starter, when I give it water, I don't measure. I just kind of throw some flour in there, a little bit of water until it is a consistency that I'm happy with, and I call it a day. I do not temperature check anything. I don't temperature check my flour, my water. I don't make sure I have a precise amount of ounces or grams of water or flour. I just kind of freeball it, and that works for me. Again, I think this really just depends on your region. Again, I live in New York, so I think that might make a little bit of a difference. I kind of have all the seasons. I'm not at a super high elevation, so that works for me when it comes to my starter. But I do want to say, if you feel discouraged that it needs to be super precise and you have to be exact with your measurements, I do not find that to be the case. Of course, when you're measuring out for a recipe, you need like a half a cup or 100 grams. Sure, yeah, you're gonna make that precise and measure everything out. When it comes to feeding and maintaining it, I don't find that I need to be super precise. So if that's something that right off the bat intimidates you, do not feel like you need to be super precise. The second little nugget of information that I have is that I have had my starter in I think about 3 different jars in the past year. I forgot to also say I've had my starter since March of 2024. I got it off of Facebook Marketplace actually. That is the starter I have been using. I did not make this starter. I've tried to make starter in the past. I can't do it. I tried last January or last February and failed, completely failed, and did not make it well at all. It got gross. There was a lot of koosh. I didn't know what was going on, and someone on Facebook was giving away some for free, so I just got some for free off of Facebook. But I have had this in several different jars. If you want to count the container that I got it in, it would be 4 jars so far in the past year. I have put a couple of pictures up here on the screen of the different jars that I've had my starter in, but most recently, within the past couple of weeks, I have put my starter in a WEC jar. So this is currently what my starter lives in. I have a little rubber band around just for where my discard sits, and if I'm going to feed it, how much it might rise or fall. And I recently invested in some WEC jars. I've been wanting them for a while. I got a 3-pack off of their website, so I'll link down below in the description box the exact pack that I bought, so if you're interested and you want to get one for yourself, you totally can. But I have been wanting a WEC jar. I've just been holding off because they are kind of pricey, but the quality seems great. They're super thick glass, and this has a lot of condensation on it right now because I pulled it out of the refrigerator. That follows up with my next point, is to keep this in the refrigerator. Keep it in the refrigerator. Please keep it in the refrigerator. If you aren't using it, put it in the fridge. This will last. It will hang out in the fridge. It'll do great things in the fridge. It won't get weird or gross. As long as it's covered and sealed properly, you won't have any issues. I always keep another little extra container of starter, this one is just in a little mason jar, in the fridge, and I will tell you why. So around maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I had some starter on the counter. It was on the counter for too long, and that was my own fault, and I knew better. I knew better, but it was on the counter for too long. I had it probably on the counter for a week without feeding it or touching it, which again is a big no-no, but also why you should put this in the fridge. If you're not using it, put it in the fridge. But I had it on the counter and I decided I wanted to use it. I fed it and nothing happened. It smelled off, it wasn't looking good, and I concluded that I killed my starter. And that is okay. It is okay to make those mistakes and make those goofs, but that is what I determined that I did. But thankfully around Christmas time, I decided to put some extra starter in a jar in the fridge and just let it hang out there as a just in case, and I'm glad I did, because when my original starter died, I had my backup in the fridge, and you really do not need that much starter to even keep on hand. I could probably take this in this jar and split it, and I could get 2 pretty good sized starter-ish amounts once it's fed from just this little bitty amount. This is probably maybe like 50 milliliters, I guess, for reading the side. It's really not that much. You don't need that much. And when it comes to all of this, the next time I want to use it, I will probably dump 3/4 of it and use it in something else, or just trash it. That's what I end up doing most of the time with my discard. I just trash most of it, and then I will feed it and then let it rise. You can have pretty much little to nothing in this jar of starter and feed it with some flour and water, and you will get a good amount of starter. You just need a little bit of those enzymes, those proteins that need to get fed that are just living in your starter already. You just need a little bit of it, and then once they're fed in a nice warm spot, you will get a nice bubbly starter. Along with my jar little blurb, I also want to say that it is really important. I wouldn't say necessarily to have a weck jar, but a jar that is tall that your starter can grow in. I had my starter when I first got it in a tiny little mason jar, and then from there I put it in this sort of more shallow, wide jar, and I will have a picture of it up here if I haven't put it on the screen already. But I had it in that jar, and it just never helped the starter rise the way you would think it should. So I ended up putting it in this jar that has monstera leaves on it, and I covered it with some beeswax wrap for the longest time. That's kind of what my starter has been hanging out in until I got this weck jar, and that made all the difference in the world. So I'm not saying you need something fancy, you don't need a weck jar, you don't need anything crazy, but any sort of tall jar that will allow that starter to rise once it's fed is a great jar to keep your starter in. And I did mention before that once I am ready to use my starter, I usually just chuck a good chunk of the discard into the trash. That is just my preference, that's just what I like to do. I don't feel the need to hold on to my discard for the perfect moment, but a great way to use your discard is, besides just in bread, when you can use it when it's fed, when an active starter in bread, you can use your discard in so many things. I have a whole playlist of sourdough treats, and even just treats that I have made from my own family recipe book. All on my channel, I will have those linked down below as well, but you can use discard for so many things. I've used it in brownies, I've used it in pancakes, you can use it in so many things. My favorite way to use discard is as a thickening agent. So if I'm making a soup or a stock, or if I'm making some sort of like beef stroganoff and I want to get my creamy mixture that goes all over my noodles a little bit thicker, I will put some starter in there. Because if you think about it, most of the time when you are trying to use a thickening agent like flour or cornstarch, you're using what the starter is made of. I know a lot of the times in the past I have just used flour as a thickening agent, but I just put a little dash of my starter in there and it works out beautifully every single time. I also want to emphasize that you can use tons of different kinds of flour besides just all-purpose. I have used whole wheat in the past, I have used freshly milled flour in the past. I tend to just go with all-purpose because it's already there, it's easy to get, and it does the trick every single time. But do not be afraid to experiment with different types of flours. If you find that you want to use your starter with a whole wheat flour, but you don't want to commit to making your whole starter a whole wheat, again, you can split it divide it, keep some in a jar in the fridge as a little bit of extra in case something goes wrong, and then from there you can experiment and kind of figure out what works for you, but you can use tons of different kinds of flour in your starter. The last few notes I want to make are the fact that, again, I mentioned that I live in New York, I'm on the East Coast. These conditions can make a difference. I have only ever lived in New York, so I can't speak for different regions of the country or even different parts of the world, but I know elevation, weather, humidity can all make a difference. So I would do your thorough research beforehand before you really get too far into your sourdough journey, if this is something that you're interested in, and really research the climate that you're in and see how a starter might be affected in those different regions. I feel as though for me, since I have all 4 seasons, we have a cold, we have a warm, I've kind of figured out how to keep my starter more comfortable during the different seasons, but I would highly encourage you to research whatever region that you are living in to see how the conditions of your starter would act in those different areas. The last note that I want to leave off on here for you guys is that it is okay to fail. It is okay to fail. Like I mentioned before, when I first started my sourdough journey many years ago, probably like 7 or 8 years ago at this point, when I was in that first culinary class of mine, I had a starter and it died. It died probably within the first week that I had it. And you know what? That is okay. It is okay for it to be a fail sometimes. It is okay for it to die. It is okay to start over. It is all trial and error. I hope this video gives you some encouragement. So I will say, as another final thought, do not be discouraged. Sourdough can be tricky, but I find it is only as difficult as you make it. It is literally just flour and water, and if Ma Ingalls could do it in her little cabin however many years ago, you can definitely do it in 2025. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below. I make 2 new videos every single week on all things sourdough, homemaking, and country living. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a comment down below and tell me what your favorite tip was, or if you have any other tips and tricks that you want to share with other people, leave them down below in the comment section, and I will see you in my next video.